But when we're in dysbiosis, our brain is constantly feeling this stress from the gut. The gut's kind of saying we're constantly under some sort of attack. It's like we're being attacked by the old theory, the lion, right? Like our ancestors would have certain responses to a very immediate threat, like a lion getting ready to attack them. But that's a temporary threat. But when we're and so we would fall back into our normal routine, and once the threat was gone. But when the gut is in dysbiosis, the idea is that the brain's getting a constant signal of constant stress. So the lion's always right in front of us. It's never going away.
I know a guy that he got stabbed because he was in really, really good shape. The doctor said that's actually where he survived. They said that if he was like scrawny and out of shape, he wouldn't have made it.
And when you have a whole population of sick people, you have a population of people who can't think much about the bigger picture, because they're so worried about their own health issues. And then you get into more of these sort of, I don't think it's questionable that then the industry takes advantage of that. Greed becomes, feeds on sickness.
What do you think modern men are more likely to do when their body starts sending warning signs? Numb the symptoms, outsource responsibility, or rebuild from within? Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. Ever look up and see those dull, grey skies streaked with chemtrails, and you feel your energy sink? You're not imagining it. Something in you knows the sky isn't supposed to look that way. But what if you could bring back the blue? What if there was a way to clear the air inside you and above you? That's where the Chembo comes in. They create powerful orgonite, tools that generate orgone energy, the life force that helps neutralize EMFs from your mobile phone, your Wi-Fi, and even 5G. It's nature's way of restoring balance, bringing cleaner air, calmer energy, and deeper sleep. Every piece from the Chembo is handmade, from tactical tower busters to beautiful pyramids and jewelry, crafted with the precise ingredients to generate real orgone energy. And here's the best part. They've proven it. For over 10 years, they've cleared thousands of miles of chemtrails, bringing the blue back to the skies around the world. So if you're ready to take back your weather and your well-being, go to thechembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 for 10% off and experience the shift for yourself. Don't fear the chemtrails or the EMF. Be empowered with the Chembo and never feel helpless again. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some more great content coming soon. What if the anxiety, burnout, brain fog, and emotional instability so many people are battling right now are not just psychological problems at all? What if millions are trying to fix stress, mood, and motivation at the level of the mind, while the real dysfunction is happening deeper in the body? Hello friends, welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave. My guest today is Gabe Dough, founder of Good Bru, who went through years of chronic reflux, fatigue, and gut dysfunction before discovering that when you start repairing the gut, you do not just change digestion, you can change clarity, resilience, emotional steadiness, and the way you show up in life. And that opens up a much bigger question. If the gut shapes the brain and the brain shapes behavior, then what happens to a culture fueled by ultra-processed food, chronic stress, overstimulation, and quick fixes? In this conversation, we go far beyond probiotics and supplements. We talk about the brain-gut connection, burnout, emotional regulation, modern food culture, the hidden biological roots of low resilience, and whether healing from within may be one of the missing keys to living with more strength, self-command, and purpose. This is not just a conversation about health. It is a conversation about human potential and whether modern life is quietly sabotaging it from the inside out.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix because there's so many levels and layers to it, Hello, Gabe. Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thank you. And it's going to be a pleasure to be on your show and we'll have a great conversation.
Yes, I'm sure we will, because from talking to you before we were recording, there are a lot of overlaps in the things that I talk about on my side as a coach and the things that you talk about and with the product that you also sell as well. And when your agent reached out to me, I thought it was quite interesting because I do know that there's a gut-brain connection because I talk about it, I've researched it, but I've never actually delved into it to get to the details and the minutiae of it. And here you are, and we're going to do just that today.
That sounds great. So, yeah, absolutely. Your gut affects every aspect of your health. And, this has been known from the times of, I don't know, the written history, but obviously Hippocrates, made a big point about how everything starts in the gut and how food should be our medicine, medicine should be our food. And it's been recognized throughout mankind, but I think we've actually gone through a phase. I know we have went through a phase in which it was really downplayed, almost dismissed. It hasn't been that long ago. I mean, only in the last decade or so that the importance of the gut and the gut-brain axis and the gut endocrine system axis and the gut muscular system axis, as well as just we have a microbiome too that exists all over our bodies, not just in our gut. However, the one that's in the gut is kind of the primary one that really drives so many aspects of our health and well-being. But I think that people in the modern medical community were sort of maybe led astray by their teachings, somewhat by purpose, maybe by the pharmaceutical industry and that kind of thing. So it's quite a big revelation and that we've had to address. I mean, in fact, I think the health issues that have progressed, the chronic health issues that have progressed so much in the last few generations has made it to the point where we can't ignore the gut and the importance of the gut because so much of it is tied back to the gut.
Absolutely, because when you look at the rise of cancers and autoimmune diseases, you look at all these chronic diseases, from my research, it very much leads back to nutrition and gut health. So this is why I'm really interested to talk to you today, because as a coach and I specialize in fitness, nutrition is one of the things I talk about a lot. And, when people start to take the nutrition seriously, they see massive changes in their consciousness, how they feel, how they show up in the world, their belief in themselves and all that stuff. So this is why, when I saw that I had an opportunity to talk to someone like you, I was like, okay, yeah, let's dive into this because I've not touched health for a few episodes on my show. So I'm really interested and keen to delve deep into this subject. So you've spoken about years of severe reflux, fatigue, and food getting stuck in your throat. What was that doing to your energy, confidence, and quality of life day to day?
Well, right. So this, the way that was kind of written by the group, that the agent, that, as you call them, that put this together, they sort of wrote that up in a way that was good to make it easy for podcasters to understand a certain storyline. But what's interesting is that I did have a very severe acid reflux, and gut health issues. But what's more interesting and not really doesn't come across in that story is that before, when I was in graduate school, I was working in the Office of Technology Transfer as the part of the university where they handle patents and things like that. And this was actually before I did have the beginnings of acid reflux at that point in time, but it hadn't really gotten super severe. But what's interesting about this part of the story is we were discussing, this is before, it was still before things really broke out as to how important the microbiome was in a popular culture way. There was obviously people who've been studying the microbiome and the gut microbiome for centuries, but there's a story to that as well, and the progression of why we didn't understand the gut microbiome very well until very recently, and it has a lot to do with technology and the way that you can study microbes in the gut. But anyhow, we had a situation where there was a technology in the university related to a researcher trying to come up with a cure for multiple sclerosis. But in all that conversation and doing the background study on that, we came across some interesting literature that just talked about a theory that MS was related to the gut and the gut microbiome. And at that time, that was very much a fringe theory. Now that's actually very much a part of the main idea behind MS and many of these other autoimmune diseases, is that they are connected to the gut. And so that's that idea that the gut microbiome could be playing a role in something as severe as MS stuck with me. And I was working on some other things in the food industry and food technology, and I came across at the Institute of Food Technologists conference a couple of years after that, I came across this idea that inulin fiber was a good prebiotic, and nobody was really using it as a prebiotic. There was one little study done out of Mexico, actually, because this agave inulin that we use now in Good Bru is made in Mexico organically. The tequila makers, grow a lot of agave, and so the fiber from those plants makes one of the best prebiotic fibers you can get. But that they weren't selling it as a prebiotic fiber, but a university in Mexico had done a study kind of alluding to the idea that this could be a great prebiotic fiber. And then at that same time, there was a company that was culturing a strain spore-forming probiotic called Bacillus coagulans. So Bacillus coagulans is found in nature. It's kind of the probiotic that nature provided to our ancestors, along with inulin fiber, which is what you get when you eat fruits and things like that, to really help support our existing colonizing microbes. So as we were digging up things from the soil, we would get Bacillus coagulans, which is a spore-forming probiotic that survives out in nature, out in the open, and therefore it also survives through the stomach and the stomach acid. And then in combination with the prebiotic fiber, can really go a long ways to supporting our colonizing microbes. And so it's like a natural, like Mother Nature providing for us a support system, like for our microbiome. But I came across those items before anybody was really putting them together. Before probiotics had really turned into a big industry like it is today. But I took that idea and I came up with a product, and it was too hard to make. So I had to kind of put all that on the shelf and go on and do other things. But during that time, my acid reflux and my GERD got continuously worse. And it got so bad that I wouldn't even sit down to eat a meal without like a 32-ounce cup of water there. I mean, I could not even sit down to eat a meal without that. I mean, I'm serious. And there was times where I would get food would get so caught up in my esophagus that, I mean, I would almost call 911 once. And it would just sit there, and it was so painful. And lots of people are suffering from acid reflux, and then GERD, which really develops after persistent acid reflux, and they know how debilitating it can be. And what's really a shame is that the medical community, our modern medical system, doesn't provide anything that's called a cure. That's a cure for that. In fact, the antacids and the proton pump inhibitors that people take to try and manage it actually cause it to get worse, because it's actually changing. We need a low pH in our stomach. This idea that you eat an acidic food or something and it makes your stomach hurt because the food's acidic is nonsense. The stomach is more acidic than any food that we eat. What's happening though is the stomach has lost its lining, the mucosal lining and the inner lining, and so the flesh of the stomach and the esophagus is exposed, and so the acid is attacking this exposed under flesh that's supposed to be covered by a protective lining, and that's causing the severe pain and then eventually damage to the esophagus. The way that it opens and closes, the sphincter there was a muscle, and it gets damaged, and then the acid reflux gets worse, and then this starts to change the cells in the esophagus, and it becomes a leading cause of cancer. It's the primary cause of esophageal cancer is, the GERD and the acid reflux and the damage that's done. And so with the medical community, once the proton pump inhibitors don't work anymore and the antacids don't work anymore, they actually have this very severe procedure that still doesn't cure the problem, but where, they actually go in and do an operation. Some people have part of their esophagus removed. And they put in a device that can, like hold the esophagus closed, and none of that is a cure. But I know you can correct this condition, because I corrected it in myself, and it's a huge deal. It's a big deal to be able to sit down at a meal, and not have that worry about having a huge cup of water sitting next to you, not having to worry about the pain and suffering that comes from it. The food getting caught in your esophagus. And this issue of GERD and esophageal reflux or acid reflux is part of a whole list of chronic issues that have been consistently on the rise, since probably going back quite a ways, but very, very, you can graph it very well from like the 80s to today. And it's part of a whole cluster of things: type 2 diabetes, esophageal acid reflux, certain kinds of cancer, colon cancer, probably esophageal cancer, obesity, and more and more of these autoimmune diseases, food allergies. All of them are they're not all on the same trajectory at the same time, for different reasons. And there's this common reason, and it's probably got to do with this whole correlation of pesticides and antibiotics and medicines and preservatives and processed foods disrupting our gut microbiome. It really probably comes back largely to disruption of the gut microbiome, because when you disrupt the gut microbiome, you start to lose the ability to process nutrients, to get not only process the nutrients, but the microbiome produces metabolites that are essential for our health and well-being. There's B vitamins that the microbiome not only helps process out of the food that we're eating, but actually produces these B vitamins, mineral like calcium and magnesium. That's largely affected our ability to absorb those minerals by the microbes and the microbiome. But there's lots of these, but there's a big class of metabolites that are really, really the job of the microbiome, and that's these short chain fatty acids, butyrate and acetate and a couple others, but butyrate's really a big one, and it's produced by the microbiome. 95% of butyrate is produced by our microbes, and we do not produce any of it by ourselves endogenously, and we get some of it from the food that we're eating. And that butyrate is the essential fuel. It provides 70% of the fuel for the cells in our colon and digestive system. But even more so than that, that is very important, but it circulates through through the body as well, through the bloodstream, and provides energy source for the cells throughout the body. And when we have dysbiosis or unbalanced microbiome, and the bad microbes are taking over control from the good microbes, we don't produce that butyrate, and the cells start to scavenge for other energy sources. And that's when the cells start to dysfunction, and that's when we get the precancerous cells, but it's also when we get the leaky gut, and that's when the cells that line the gut lining, start to lose their tight junctions. They create gaps between the cells, and these things that like undigested food, undigested proteins, toxins, other things that we want to keep in our gut, moving through the gut, so they have proper digestion or elimination, now get outside of the gut, and our bodies attack these things as if which they are foreign, and it causes this cascade of immune response events, and inflammation. And so losing the microbes that we need, or not having healthy levels of the microbes that we need and higher levels of the bad microbes, now has this whole cascade effect that affects every system in the body, the endocrine system, the nervous system, the musculoskeletal system, of course, the digestive system itself. And as you were saying earlier in the intro about the food and nutrition, well, there's the old saying, we are what we eat. But I think people have to understand there's more to that. It's not just what you eat, but it's, are you able to digest and get the nutrients that you need from what you're eating? So eating healthy is important, but we've also got so many other things going on in our environment that we have to now very consciously. I think all through history, people have had digestive health issues, and they weren't conscious of the microbiome necessarily, or at all. But now in the world we're in today, it's almost like you got to be proactive in understanding these things, because you're not only just getting sick from some pathogen or something like that. Well, of course, people got exposed to toxins centuries ago as well. I've had a lot of really bad ones. I mean, the Mad Hatter, and mercury and things like that. So ever since people have been able to, really start to do anything industrial, we've been constantly exposing ourselves to different toxins and the consequences of those toxins. But in the world we live in today, it's almost like you have to actually fight like a battle against it, because, okay, antibiotics have done a lot of good, but they've also been tremendously abused, right? So you can see in every generation since antibiotics have been prevalent, lack of losing diversity in our microbiome. And we inherit our microbiome from our mothers at birth. And so, you add into that glyphosate, and you add into that all the food preservatives, and you add into that sedentary lifestyles, and on and on and on. And it's kind of like now you can't just say, I'm going to go eat this food. And that's even that too, is we're not really digging our food up from the garden anymore, right? So even if you're eating organically, it's still cleaned and washed, which it needs to be. You can't really sit in a grocery store unless it is. And it's the same thing with fermented foods. Like, it's a great idea to eat fermented foods, but if you're not making them at home, you're probably not really getting what you think you're getting. It's a great story, but you're probably not really getting what you think you're getting if you're buying a fermented food from the grocery store. I mean, these studies are done over and over again. You can't really have yogurt sitting on a shelf that's not pasteurized or preserved, and obviously we add a lot of sugar to these things, et cetera. So, you have to really be taking a conscious approach to your gut and your gut health, because it's what you have to do to counteract all the other things that we're putting into our environment, into our system.
Okay. So going back a little bit to when you had your severe reflux and stuff like that, at what point did you realize that was not just a symptom problem, but a deeper issue affecting your whole system?
Oh, well, I mean, you kind of can't ignore it. It's such a big issue when you have some sort of digestive health issue, whether in my case, the acid reflux and the GERD. You start to know. I mean, that was the first time in my life where I had really started to probably put on more weight too than I normally. I've always been pretty athletic and I played sports and that sort of thing. So going along with that same situation, I had a business that I was trying to start. I had a lot of other things going on. And I just did not have, the kind of clarity of mind I didn't have the mood, the control over my mood and emotions the way that I would like to. But you also have sort of a fear with this as well. So if you're really worried about the fact that if I got to go sit down at a meal and I'm not going to be able to eat that meal properly, that leaves sort of that in and of itself has a psychological effect on you, and being very careful about, making sure that you're able to swallow your food and get your food down. And it's crazy that, now it's not really, for years now, it hasn't even really been an issue for me. I do have somewhat, say, conscious of it, but I can sit down and eat a meal now. And if I don't do it, but I can even eat a meal, without really drinking anything while I'm having the meal, not that I like to eat that way, but if back in 2015, it wasn't even an option. It wasn't even an option. And, and I know lots of people are living that way. And that's one of the things with our product, which I think is so interesting, because with Good Bru, so I had sort of have a background and knowledge, just self-educated on the gut microbiome, with the product Good Bru. But my product problems with the acid reflux, sort of came as a parallel. I think the way the story kind of comes out is that I came up with Good Bru because of my problems. But no, it was more of it's more like one of these God things. It's like I went away from working on Good Bru, then I had gut health problems. I'm like, wait, this gut health thing is really important. I need to go back to working on that. So, it's kind of, it's sort of like the parallel that so many of us are having these gut health issues. There's chronic constipation and IBS, and we'll talk about just the connection. I know you want to talk about the gut-brain axis and trauma and how trauma is processed, and things that are a little more disconnected that you don't feel directly. Obviously, if you're having acid reflux or chronic constipation, you feel that very immediately. But with Good Bru, the Good Bru was not created to specifically target any one thing. One of the most wonderful things, though, that I hear all the time is how much it's helped people with acid reflux and GERD. And I know, and because I experienced it, I know how important that is to people. So I know where they're coming from, and I hear it over and over again that it's helped them, and quite rapidly in many cases with that issue, as well as chronic constipation. And about 20% of the population suffers from severe acid reflux. That's a lot of people. And about 20% of the adult population suffers from chronic constipation, which is also a big issue. And that's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot of people.
And when we'll look at it all across the board, probably around 50% or over 50% of the U.S. adult population, is comparable in Europe as well, suffers chronic digestive issues. And then we all experience some sort of digestive issues at any given time. That's just, part of life. But think about it, 50% of the population is suffering from some sort of digestive health issue now. And then when you think about it that way, and you think about all the other issues that we're dealing with that are on the rise, you can really see the connection now between digestive health and all these other, autism, on and on and on. PTSD. We'll talk about that in a minute too. What the military has learned about the gut in relation to PTSD, which just kind of informs the rest of us of how important the gut-brain axis is, and a healthy gut is to just dealing with daily stress.
Absolutely. And looking back now, what were the clearest signs that your body was fundamentally out of balance long before you fully understood what was going on?
Well, for me, for me personally, there was a lot of pain, but I guess before that, yeah, if your gut's not working right, you just start to not feel as well. You just don't feel good. You don't feel with having as much energy. But I think a lot of it's mood, and probably not wanting to exercise and work out like I had previously done. For so much of my life. I really enjoyed being physically fit and staying active. And I think it just compounded with working on business and entrepreneurship. And then you have a health issue like that. And I think it just takes you further and further away from the things that are actually there to help you, and through some other life experiences through this period of time in my life, other things that caused a lot of stress and problems in my life, relationship issues and things like that. I kind of learned a lot of other things too. I've learned a lot about say cold therapy and cold water and how these really primitive things in our bodies need to be turned on. We need to have certain amounts of good stress in our lives or expose ourselves to certain amounts of good stress to help activate many of these other healing mechanisms that we have innate to us, rather than relying on some sort of external, medicine or therapy or that kind of thing, or using them in conjunction. But there's something that I started saying to myself is, don't avoid what makes you stronger. And the bad thing about being sick is that it actually sort of makes you want to avoid those things, right? So like when you're not feeling well, now you want to avoid exercise or physical activity, but that's exactly what you need, And I think it might even be that way with your diet's a little bit funnier, but it might actually be that way with food too. I can't say that specifically in my case because I don't. But I do know that a lot of the things that I like to eat were the things that would also a lot of times cause a lot of problems because there were things like whole foods and those sorts of things. So, like broccoli, broccoli was one of the things that would really get stuck in my throat. For example, fish. I love fish. I grew up on the coast. Fish was one of the ones that would get stuck really bad in my esophagus. All these things are good for you. What goes down easy? A milkshake. Milkshake goes right down. So not exactly what you want to be feeding yourself to heal your gut, though. So
absolutely. Now, you mentioned suffering just now. So what did that period of suffering teach you that comfort and good health never could?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, well, it teaches you it teaches you a lot of things. There's probably different ways to answer that. Maybe the one thing I would like to just answer it as, because this might be most practical and pertinent to everybody, is that you got to believe in yourself to take your health into your own hands, or at least take it into your hands and then find people who are more interested in your own personal condition and trying to help you heal in a way that is the natural. I won't say the natural way of healing. I'm gonna just use that because I don't know I have a better word. The medical system, for all the good that it's done for us, obviously, it's undeniable now that there's a track or a path of reliance that it puts you on. And it's also, I think, undeniable now that there's been a lot of effort over the years to take the mentality or the mindset away from people that they can take care of themselves. I see it. I've seen it so much in so many different ways, but there's so many people who won't make a move or won't do anything anymore unless they think it's in line with what their doctor would tell them to do, or if they have to check with their doctor, or, and that it's almost heresy now to tell somebody to think for themselves when it comes to their health, right? And there's a lot of, and I really think it's a big psyop on a lot of people, that you can't think for yourself. Well, what do you know about health? You're not a doctor, but it's your body. You're the one feeling it and experiencing it. And lots of other people have felt and experienced these same things. And I can tell you from my own personal experience and from lots of other people that I've spoken with, is that many times the best healing, the real true healing, comes from people just doing self-discovery, and it's not simply from taking a pill. Now, can you use these things in conjunction? I mean, sure. But I would say one of the things that's taught me was I didn't get healed by a doctor. Okay. I mean, I got healed by doing my own research and work on myself. So I would I would just try to make that point to people,
And I think that's a really important point because, as I was mentioning to you before we recorded, that we have like one of the things that keep us in slavery is religion, but there are different forms of religion. And just believing what your doctor tells you is a form of religion because you're not allowed to question, right? Like, to ask your doctor questions like, okay, what are the side effects of this? What are the pros and cons? Like, what are my chances? You know what I mean? To ask actual thought-provoking questions to them. Instead, is just like, take this pill, you'll be fine. And you're like, okay, sir, okay, ma'am, and just do it. So there's no sort of like thinking for yourself, like what you were saying. So I think that's a very important point that you made. So let's transition to the gut-brain connection and the modern man. So you speak a lot about the gut-brain connection. What do people still fail to understand about how the gut affects mood, focus, stress, and resilience?
Wow. Well, it's a lot. It covers many. There are many aspects of this. There's not just one thing. So I talked a little bit earlier about metabolites. So let's just kind of just try to keep it somewhere simple for a minute. So when we eat food, we have to digest and process that food. We chew it up, and it starts there. We have actually microbes in our mouths, so oral microbes, which can be in dysbiosis. In fact, eating good fiber and probiotics that balances the lower intestine, which is where the home of the big home of the gut microbiome is, affects us all the way up to our oral health. And we've also now have a lot of research and studies that shows the connection between the microbiome and our oral health and things like dementia and mood and many other things. So a lot of things happen starting right in the mouth. And as it moves through our body, our stomach produces these acids and enzymes endogenously that helps us start break down that food. And then as it gets into the small intestine also is a very complex and organ that has many different parts to it, and produces enzymes itself. And then we get down to the lower intestine. We have basically an entire organ or part of our digestive tract that's primary purpose is to be the home to our microbiome. And when you think about that, we have an organ, the lower intestine, the colon, designated to being a home for our microbes. And that's how important they are to our health. And so these microbes not only, help to, like we were saying earlier, pull nutrients from the food that we're eating, but they actually produce these metabolites. So they actually take nutrients and they convert it into other molecules. And many of these molecules, like the butyrate we were talking about, or B vitamins, or many other things, are essential for cellular function throughout the body. And when we talk about something like leaky gut, well, when we're talking about butyrate, again, a metabolite produced by the microbes, that what they're seeing is not only does that butyrate play a critical role in having a healthy digestive gut lining, preventing leaky gut, but what they also see is that same people that have the dysbiosis and the leaky gut also have leaks in the blood-brain barrier. And then they're also, so the same molecules produced by the gut and the gut microbiome that keep the gut lining healthy also keep the blood-brain barrier healthy. And they see the bacteria that now escapes through the gut, makes a home, say, in tumors and cancerous tumor cells, or also in fat cells. So they're finding in the fat cells throughout the body, the same bacteria that are escaping from the gut and now making a home in our fat cells. They're also finding these in the brains of people with dementia and other mental health issues and under autopsies or in mouse studies. And so these things are all tremendously connected. But just right off of the bat, these metabolites that are being produced by the microbes or not being produced by the microbes has a lot to do with cellular function, which then plays a role in mood and how we function. So in fatigue and energy levels and all of these kinds of things. So one of the very elementary ways to understand the gut-brain connection when it comes to just mood directly is there's this kind of this idea that if your gut's dysregulated, you're always in a sense of stress. So there's this nerve that runs from the gut to the brain. It's called the vagus nerve. You probably heard about it. And about 70% of the information that flows between the gut and the brain via the vagus nerve is from the gut up to the brain. And the gut is also full of neurons, way more neurons than we would have if the gut was nothing more than just a channel for food to flow through. These neurons, that's where we come up with the second brain. So sometimes the gut is called the second brain. And it literally has like 100 million neurons. I mean, it is like a second brain. That's a lot of neurons. And these neurons are constantly picking up information from what's happening in the gut. And you can see these connections between, like, let's say you got to go out and do public speaking. A lot of people get physically sick when they go out and do public speaking or some other thing. That's a gut-brain connection that's showing you showing you how the gut and the brain and the endocrine system all kind of communicate with one another to serve some purpose in some sort of environment. There's a reason for that. But when we're in dysbiosis, there's this kind of very basic idea about the connection is that our brain is constantly feeling this stress from the gut. The gut's kind of saying we're constantly under some sort of attack. It's like we're being attacked by the old theory, the lion, right? Like our ancestors would have certain responses to a very immediate threat, like a lion getting ready to attack them. But that's a temporary threat. But when we're and so we would fall back into our normal routine and once the threat was gone. But when the gut is in dysbiosis, the idea is that the brain's getting a constant signal of constant stress. So the lion's always right in front of us. It's never going away. And so if that's the case, how do you regulate all your other moods and emotions, right? So that's a very basic idea of what you're asking, like day-to-day mood. But I'd like to go a little bit further because this is, I think, very enlightening. So there's 90% of the serotonin produced in the body is produced in the gut, not in the brain. No, so about 10% is produced in the brain and 90% in the gut. And serotonin is this hugely important neurotransmitter. It's not just a feel-good molecule. The heart has serotonin receptors, so it regulates like heartbeat and that sort of thing. Serotonin is also the precursor molecule for melatonin. And so in every cell in our body, we have melatonin. It's not just the melatonin that we think of in the brain that regulates circadian rhythm, but melatonin is in every cell in the body pretty much, I guess. I think is in all the cells in the body, but at least all of the, the endocrine system and, pretty much everywhere in the body. I believe every cell in the body, but from what I've read. But that melatonin plays a huge role in mitochondrial function. So the melatonin in the cell has this major role in mitochondrial function, but that melatonin is a conversion of serotonin to melatonin. So for one example is if our gut's in dysbiosis, not producing the right kinds of metabolites that keeps our gut healthy, then these what are called enterochromaffin cells that are in the gut are not producing the right levels of serotonin, which not only affects our mood, but then it also affects all the cellular function throughout the body because we don't have the right levels of serotonin. But here's what's even crazier. Okay, so along with serotonin being produced in the gut and being produced in the brain, there's also a hormone called a corticotropin release factor. And it regulates cortisol levels, which is the precursor to adrenaline. Our gut, those same cells that produce serotonin in the gut also produce this corticotropin factor, the same exact cells. So what they've seen now is when we're in dysbiosis, not only do the cells that are producing the serotonin and this corticotropin factor not produce the appropriate levels or the optimal levels of serotonin, but it also overproduces and upregulates the cortisone precursor hormone. And so you're getting double whammy. You're getting less of the serotonin and you're getting more of this corticotropin release factor, which is now stimulating the release of cortisol, which we need a little bit of it, but we need it in the right times of the day and in the right kinds of environments and produce it. If we were constantly got too much cortisol and too little serotonin, you can just see the effect that's going to have throughout the body and when it relates to mood and every other function of the body, really, for that matter. But then what's so interesting about that is that's exactly what the military had started to learn about PTSD. So we've known that for a while that the gut microbiome really affects mood. You can really see it. It affects the mood in everybody, but you can really see it in extreme conditions. So like with children with autism, there's been many, many studies now showing that that mood it can be improved in autistic children by changing the gut microbiome. Same thing with people with PTSD. It could play a big role in how severe the PTSD is. But then when we went further, when the military was studying this in veterans, they've started to realize that this might actually play a big role because of that balance between cortisol and serotonin in how we process trauma. So if you go all the way back, not only to after you have PTSD or whatever, to the moment when you experience the trauma that ended up resulting in PTSD, that people with a dysregulated microbiome at the time they experience the trauma have less ability to process the trauma and now are more likely to develop PTSD. So two soldiers experiencing the same traumatic event, one of them with a healthy gut microbiome, one of them with a dysregulated microbiome. The difference between one of them developing PTSD and the other one processing the trauma in a healthy way might actually come back to the gut and the gut microbiome. And I think that's really tells us a lot. And then when they look at this, the person that got me to read about that was a Vietnam veteran who was a retired dentist now. So I've known him for a long time, but he didn't know about my product and Good Bru. We were just sitting there chatting one day and about gut, and then we got on the subject of gut health and whatnot. And he, him being a retired dentist and a Marine veteran, he kind of keeps up with all this stuff. And he's the one who was like, hey, you really should look into what the military is learning about the gut microbiome and how it relates to, all these cognitive issues that veterans are particularly prone to. And now they wasn't only in Vietnam, but it's in all other conflicts now that they've seen that correlation. But Vietnam's a really interesting one because it was a really high percentage of people, soldiers that came out of Vietnam with PTSD. And if you think about the Agent Orange and the folates and all the other issues that people, there was a situation there and an environment there that was just really apt to dysregulating people's gut health. Also, the food that they were eating, the meals ready to eat, and then just the being in that tropical environment. As this fellow said, he said, I don't know of anybody that went to Vietnam who didn't have severe diarrhea at least once. So you're in an environment that would dysregulate the gut on multiple levels. And therefore, that makes it even makes this correlation because there was a really high number of people with PTSD coming out of that war. So I kind of answering your question, but on multiple levels, it's the metabolites that are produced, the cellular health that is produced, the way that it affects the endocrine system, on and on and on. And then this bacteria translocating from the gut, getting through the leaky gut and then affecting and going right to the nervous system, like, actually infecting, not just affecting, but infecting the nervous system. So yeah, that's a lot back to the gut. And I also will say with the proteins. So the gut, our whole body runs on proteins, but our body doesn't absorb. We don't use whole protein. So when we eat a steak or we take some collagen, our body doesn't absorb that whole molecule. It has to be broken down. And the gut microbiome plays a big role in breaking those proteins down into peptides and amino acids that we can then use. But it doesn't just break down those proteins into those amino acids and peptides. It does that, but the microbiome actually produces a lot of these peptides and amino acids. So it actually converts things into peptides and amino acids. And then our body needs these peptides and amino acids for all sorts of different functions. People think about muscle strength and that sort of thing, which of course is one thing that we get from the peptides and amino acids. But the peptides and amino acids are regulating everything. Our immune system is all protein. It's all peptides, all amino. That's the whole immune system is what is running on, and all these other functions of our body. So in our product, for example, the probiotic that we use in Good Bru has been studied multiple times to, in and of itself, to increase protein utilization by up to 20%. And that's from, those microbes breaking down those proteins into useful molecules. But one of the biggest problems with not digesting proteins correctly and not having a microbiome that breaks down these proteins is that also is, kind of this precursor idea of the leaky gut and things getting outside of the gut. And one of the worst things that gets outside of the gut before it's fully, digested is proteins. So proteins are like this super red flag to our immune system. And when we have undigested proteins getting outside of the gut, our immune system just goes on high alert and starts attacking those proteins. And then it starts attacking everything all through the body, which then leads to more leaky gut. It also leads to more dysbiosis. And so,
I've got a question. So you've mentioned dysbiosis quite a few times in this conversation. What does it actually look like in real life before someone ever gets a label for it?
Well, dysbiosis is, I don't know if you get labeled for. What you get labeled for is the different elements that we experience from dysbiosis. So, when it's very much directly related to the gut, we talk about things like IBS. Well, IBS is not one specific disease; it's a group of symptoms, irritable bowel syndrome, and then there's IBD, which is different. That's immune bowel disease. What is that? I can't think of the actual acronym, but basically it's like Crohn's disease. And then colonitis and colon cancer eventually, and GERD and acid reflux. These are all the irritable bowel syndrome and I'm just drawing a blank, but these are the things that you look at that you don't really get diagnosed with dysbiosis. Now, someday that is starting to change. Now, there are obviously in alternative medicine, there's people who would say, "Hey, you've got dysbiosis." They would say it like that, like your problem is dysbiosis. But in mainstream medicine, they don't really say you've got dysbiosis. They say you've got this or you've got that or whatever that is. Which could also be related to fatigue, and it could be eczema, and it could be all these different things could be related to dysbiosis. So you don't really get diagnosed in mainstream medicine as having dysbiosis. You get diagnosed with the things that are the result of dysbiosis. But our gut and our lower intestine produces its own environment. The gut microbiome produces its own environment, the environment that it likes. And so, as I was mentioning earlier, we inherit the gut microbiome from our mothers at birth. That's how important it is. This gets passed on from mother to child. And then we see people that are birthed through cesarean sections have much less diversity in their gut microbiomes.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's very significant. So it's this
just because it's not a vaginal birth.
Right, exactly. And then nursing also. It's so important. That Mother Nature has actually provided a whole mechanism during breastfeeding to send microbes into the breast milk, and so that the baby picks up a lot of its microbes from the breast milk that it's consuming as well. And breast milk also has one of the best prebiotics that we could have for our gut microbiome. So a large percentage of milk and breast milk is a prebiotic for the microbiome. So this is how important it is to us. And if you want to, we can go. I mean, there's so many different topic areas. I try and keep it somewhere where you can connect the dots. But if you think about that and prebiotic and how important that is to us, having these microbes. Think about this: that we have roughly 23,000 genes in our DNA, our own, human DNA, 23,000 genes. But the microbes that we have in our gut, which is affecting us and affecting our health in the same way that our own genes are, is 3 million genes. So we're living with a with a microbiome that's affecting our health and doing all these critical roles in our health. You think of the microbiome like it's an organ. It really is like an organ of the body. The microbiome itself is, with 3 million genes versus our 23,000 genes of our own DNA, doing all these important things. And so what happens if we don't have a healthy gut? If we're not in homeostasis, so when the gut microbiome is in balance, it's called homeostasis. When it's in dysbiosis, we have too many, the bad bacteria are taking over the good bacteria. It's called dysbiosis. Like we were talking about the stomach produces its own it produces its own acidity. Small intestine pretty much produces the enzymes and things itself, but it's all affected by the microbiome. And how healthy the stomach is and how healthy the small intestine is directly related to how healthy the microbiome is that's down in the large intestine. So in the large intestine doesn't really produce these enzymes and different things that the stomach and the small intestine does. The microbes produce those. And so if we get into dysbiosis, we still may have a lot of the good bugs, but they're sequestered. They're not dominating the environment of the lower intestine. And the bad bugs are. And the bad bugs produce an environment that they want to live in. So it's very hard for the good microbes to come back into control. But vice versa, when the good microbes are in control, they produce metabolites in the environment that they like to live in, which helps keep the bad bugs, at bay. But they're still there. And lactobacillus and bifidobacteria are two of these real keystone probiotics in our lower intestine that produce lactic acid, which helps to create that lower pH environment that the good microbes like to live in, and the bad microbes are sequestered by. However, once we're in dysbiosis, it's very hard to get those back, and that's where using the right kinds of prebiotics and spore-forming probiotic like Bacillus coagulans. We can talk more about specifically these things, but Bacillus coagulans very much specifically, because Bacillus coagulans is like this support mechanism that we would get from nature and from the environment that produces lactic acid also. And it's also a spore, so it survives through the stomach, which stomach acid kills most of the things going through it, which is a good thing. But that's why you try to take probiotics in capsule form and that sort of thing. They don't really get to where they need to get to. Spore-forming Bacillus coagulans gets to the lower intestine where it produces lactic acid, which, along with a good prebiotic, helps to now build up the environment to support the lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, then which starts to support all these other really important microbes. So it's like they're still learning about these things, but there's probably about 1,000 species of microbes in our lower intestine that are doing a very important job, and you'll hear about more and more of these over time and how they're related to very specific things, very specific health issues or good health or whatnot. So we have to support a good balanced microbiota in our lower intestine, and we have to do things to help keep that to keep the good bugs in control. So that we get from our mothers at birth.
Okay, now I want to talk to you about something that might feel like a gear change. Stay with me. You know what genuinely frustrates me? Watching men who are spiritually switched on, doing the inner work, evolving their consciousness, reading the books, listening to the podcasts, but still completely lost when it comes to what they're putting into their body every single day. Still carrying weight they do not want, still operating below their potential, still letting food control them instead of the other way around. And here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. An awakened mind living in an undisciplined body is still a divided man. I've seen it too many times, and it bothers me enough to build something about it. So I created the Compound Body Training Custom Meal Plan, a done-for-you 4-week nutrition system built specifically around your body, your biology, your goals, and yes, your favorite foods. This is not a template. This is not a generic diet sheet somebody copy-pasted from the internet. This is your personal nutritional blueprint, designed around you, delivered to you, ready to follow from day one. Because if you want to take a do-it-yourself approach to your health and your sovereignty, This is the most powerful tool you can start with. Just go to compoundbodytraining.com/meal plan. The link is in the description below. Your body should reflect the standard you actually live by. Now here's the thing about that meal plan. It only works if your body can actually absorb what you're putting in it. And that starts in your gut. Most people don't realize their microbiome is the foundation of everything. Energy, focus, mood, recovery. Which is exactly why I want to tell you about Good Bru. Most people walking around right now are dealing with some version of the same problem. Bloating, brain fog, low energy, mood instability, burnout they cannot shake, and they're blaming stress, sleep, their diet, trying everything, but here's what almost nobody is talking about. 90% of your serotonin, the neurotransmitter that controls your mood, your calm, your ability to think clearly, is produced in your gut, not your brain, your gut. So if your microbiome is damaged or depleted, your mental and physical performance suffers every single day, and most people have no idea that's what's happening to them. Good Bru was built exactly to fix that. It's a prebiotic and probiotic powder. 1 scoop into your morning coffee, tea, or oatmeal, delivering 1 billion active live cultures per serving, plus 3.5 grams of soluble prebiotic fiber to rebuild and feed your gut microbiome from the ground up. And the probiotic strain they use, BC30, survives 10 times more effectively than standard yogurt cultures. That means it actually reaches your gut and gets to work. No sugar, no gluten, no dairy, no compromise. This is a clean, clinically grounded product, and it's one I want in the hands of every person in this community. I've been taking it now for a few weeks, and I have had more energy during the day, faster muscle recovery from training, more mental focus, and improved mood and better quality sleep. Go to goodbru.com/cm7, use code CM7 at the checkout for 10% off, exclusively for this community. Link is in the show notes below. So, do you think then that a lot of men who feel flat, foggy, anxious or unmotivated are misreading a body problem as a mindset problem?
Well, I think so the mind, body, spirit is all connected, right? And as we were speaking a little bit about before we came on to start the show, these things are kind of holistic. We have a holistic body. We have to sort of support all aspects of our health because they're interactive. And we do know that, like sleep, we know that the microbiome, for example, has its own circadian rhythm, but that circadian rhythm is in balance with our circadian rhythm. So they're in balance. And we know that, say, for example, when our circadian rhythm gets off balance, it affects the microbiome. Or we know that the microbiome plays a huge role in how our athletic performance and how we perform from a stamina point of view or muscle strength point of view, or et cetera. But we also know that when we don't exercise, we also affect the microbiome in reverse of that. So I think what you have to keep in mind is a mindset issue versus a health or a physical issue. They're working together. They're in concert together. And yes, you do need to use your conscious effort to say, I can do this. I can make myself get up and go exercise. I can convince myself that I'm not eating well and I need to start eating better. So your mind is playing a huge role in self-awareness. Self-awareness is this very, very important thing. Why is something not working right at my life? How do I do better at that? But the reverse of that is when we do things that are good for our bodies, when we eat well, when we exercise, when we sleep right, we actually create a better mentality. And so they're very much reciprocal. And it's like, it's like the concept of sin, right? Like, we've taken that concept in modern and taken it all over the place. But when you really think about what was that concept about, the concept was about basically, not doing things to hurt yourself, right? I mean, that was kind of like the concept. It's kind of like, when we hurt ourselves, that's kind of the concept of of sin. Don't sin, not because it's just some affront to God. It's because it's there to tell you what's good for your body and what's not good for your body. And you can say, look at that concept, or for your mind, your body, your spirit, all of it, for, and how we can't really be a sovereign individual, as you were mentioning, if we're not healthy, if we don't have a good mindset, if we're not taking care of ourselves. And so, don't try not, I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, but, we're all going to do things that aren't healthy. We're all going to, but remember, you're lifting, you're making the bar, you're making it harder for yourself. And so that's where mindset really comes into play. It's A, the discipline not to hurt yourself, but B, when you do hurt yourself, to be aware of it, to admit to it, to say like, hey, I didn't do the thing that was best for me. Stop doing it. And now I got to put extra effort in to get back there. So you remember, there's always, it's a balancing act, right? Like if you're going to pay the price for one thing, but you're going to have to use that mindset, as you were saying, to bring yourself back into balance. You got to actually take action, so hey, develop discipline to not hurt yourself and to keep yourself in shape mentally, physically, but, also have the mindset that that's not life. And things come out of the blue too. I mean, get in a car wreck. You can get in a car wreck this afternoon, right? That's not your fault. You didn't necessarily do that to yourself, but now you've put yourself in this challenge to get better. But remember too, that if you are, in a practice and a good mindset to keep your body healthy and your mind healthy, that if you do get in the car wreck this afternoon, you're going to have stand a lot better chance of coming out of that thing, not with a lot less severe injuries, or a better ability to recover from those injuries. I mean, those are kind of the things that the old high school coach, tried to tell you.
Absolutely, because I know a guy that he got stabbed, and he's not really a mate of mine, but he's a mate of my cousin, and he got stabbed. And because he was in really, really good shape, the doctor said that's actually why he survived. They said that if he was like scrawny and out of shape, he wouldn't have made it. So what you're saying there is, like, if you have like an accident or something that happens to you, if you're in good physical shape, you can recover better, Yeah. So one of the strongest ideas in your material is that we treat stress, fatigue, and mental struggle as problems of the mind to be solved by pills or willpower. Where does that model fail people most badly?
Yeah, right. So the main thing is that, well, it fails them in a lot of ways because they become dependent on things that are short-circuiting our natural ability to heal ourselves. I mean, so if you just try to, put the Band-Aid over something, without any other attempts to heal yourself, you're not really going to heal yourself with just the Band-Aid. Now, certainly these things can be used in conjunction. I mean, there's certainly a time to take an aspirin or an Advil or an antibiotic or whatever, but if that's all you do, you're just going to keep coming back to that same problem. So I think it's, we talk about addiction, right? When we talk about addiction in some very specific ways, how, whether it's drugs or social media or whatever it might be, kind of takes over control of our health, our patterns. I think it's not wrong to say that people actually become addicted to medicine. Like, they become addicted to the whole process of medicine, right? Like, they're just in this constant cycle of becoming sick from something, going to a doctor and getting a pill that then relieves their symptoms, to only pick up some sort of new symptoms, and then going back to the doctor and getting another pill, until people have a whole cupboard full of pills, and that's seen over and over again. And in fact, I don't know, I can't pull this, you can find it really easily, but the statistic of how many people are of adult age in the United States that don't take any medication. It's like very, very few, it's a very low number of people who don't actually have some sort of prescription medication that they're taking, you know. And obviously we didn't always have those pills. So what were people doing before that? Or it's obvious that not everybody does take those pills or those medications. So what's everybody else doing? Or if we look at like a lot of these communities around the world where people are living to very healthy, long age, like these societies and cultures where people have high numbers of centenarians in their community, they're not taking a bunch of medicines and medications. They're not getting to 100 years old because of medicine like that. You know, it's a physical activity, good food, good social surroundings, probably a mentality that we can take care of ourselves. I was listening to, I forget his name right now, but he's one of the most well-respected people on this subject area. He's studied these communities all around the world. And he really taught about many of these things: exercise, the foods they were eating, etc. But also the social interaction between these people. Really, in these communities, really care and love for one another, you know. And that's a big deal, you know. And maybe also being healthy and having healthy guts and eating well makes it easier to love one another. You know, there's a reciprocal thing going on there.
Absolutely. I think the two countries in the world that have the highest centenarians, I think, are a Greek island, can't remember its name, and Sardinia, just off the mainland Italy. So yeah, they seem to have like the highest number of centenarians, which is fascinating. And they're both Mediterranean as well. So how much harder is it to access calm, gratitude, and emotional steadiness when your biology is irritated underneath the surface?
Yeah, so that's right. So this is interesting because gratitude is something very personal to me. It's something that is the mindset that I've come to believe is the mindset that God or universe or whatever wants from us. When we're not grateful, it seems like that's when the world beats us down. That's when we can't deal with things the right way, is when we lack gratitude. What's so interesting about that is it seems like maybe some people just are grateful people, but it seems like from a lot of us anyways, especially when you read through the history books and see that this concept of gratitude comes back over and over again from every generation, it seems like you have to experience some sort of event in your life that makes you come to this concept of gratitude. So it's really important that we're always telling every generation, we're telling, you know, everybody and our kids and everything that it's, you know, about gratitude, because they might not be able to grasp it right then and there. But children seem to be grateful. Like, I don't know what it is, but children seem to be generally grateful. And then it's when we get older, we kind of lose this idea of what it really means to be thankful and grateful for life and the simple things. But it's important that we keep that message going, because if we don't, when that person comes to that wall or that place in their lives where they're under a lot of struggle, if nobody's told them, hey, be grateful, then they might not really understand how to start looking for it. Like, you can train yourself to be grateful. You can train yourself to have a grateful mind. It's actually something you can develop. It's a skill. It's a skill set. But when you're under a lot of pain and suffering, dysbiosis, you know, not having good balance of serotonin and too much cortisol and all these things, you obviously got a lot of things working against that part of the mind and the brain that can be grateful. You know, sometimes, you know, you hate the world and you hate life and you're you know, you're like, why me? You know, but then at the other hand, it's those situations that as we start to discover gratitude and we start discovering the power of gratitude and how fast once you can be grateful for anything, and I'm not saying that you're constantly always going to be this way. I'm just saying that once you have it, you've trained yourself or you've experienced at one time that, you know, I really shifted my mind from being resentful to being grateful. If you've done that one time and really noticed it, it's a very fast change in how you now are able to deal with the problem in front of you. And then you start to understand that practice. It's like riding the bicycle. You know, you fall off, and then all of a sudden you ride that bicycle and then you can do it over and over again. It's kind of like that with gratitude and other things. Is once you've experienced it one time, like I took something that I was really resentful for, something that I just was mad about, and I finally made myself grateful for it, grateful for the life. And then now all these other ways of looking at things opened up, and I was able to progress through. Like I did it once, and I can do it again, and I can do it again, and I can do it again. So when I get in a bad mood, make yourself, be grateful for it. And it's really easy to be grateful for the luxuries of life. What you got to be grateful for is you got to be grateful for the real painful things. And that's hard. That can be really hard because they get stuck in your throat. And it's like, why am I supposed to be grateful for that? You won't really find the answers to your problems until you are grateful for it, because, well, this is going to go on this subject, but it's like that. When you make yourself be grateful for something that you really can't understand why you should be grateful for, then you're being grateful for your life, because your life is all of these things. It's all the good, it's all the bad. And in fact, our lives are largely defined more by what we're not than by what we are. And so a lot of people, are ungrateful because why am I not, why didn't I get that job promotion, or why don't I have as much money as that person, or why wasn't able to become, the musician that I wanted to be, or whatever it is. But then you got to realize you're more defined by what you don't have. You're more defined by what you don't have, what you haven't been just given, and that defines you as much as all the things that you are. And so when you can be grateful for what you lost or what you didn't get that you wanted, now you're being grateful for you. You're being grateful for you're 1 in 8 billion people that are walking around, or 1 in 100 billion people that have lived through the history of mankind. And each one of us had our own path. And so, yes. So yeah, you need to really work on that as a mindset thing. But obviously, all these other health aspects of our lives kind of work out. When you're grateful for life, you have a tendency to take better care of yourself because you are grateful for your life. And when you're taking care of yourself, you kind of give yourself less obstacles to be grateful for. It's better to do the best that you can at keeping yourself healthy through diet and exercise, and of course now leading to a healthy gut, and all these other important things, the way that we treat one another, and so that you don't make it so hard on yourself to have to, don't make it so hard to be grateful for your life, too. So but you got to remember, even, but no matter what, you see it a lot of times in the older people when they're right there at the end of their life, they're dying from some, whatever it might be. I think of my grandmother when she was dying, kind of from lung issues, a lot of really painful, like she could barely breathe. But that woman, just seemed to me like she was grateful, like her time had come. But she, had seen so many wonderful things. All her children, had grown up, and she'd seen the good and the bad of life and all of that, and she was very grateful that she had lived her life. She seemed to die as a grateful person. So, and I don't think she had to wait coming to the end of her life to be grateful. I think she was a grateful person for much of her life, but it does seem to be something that maybe we're naturally very grateful as children, and then we lose that, and then we have to regain that. And it's, so it's a very important aspect of life, and your health is a big part of that, so.
Okay. So let's transition to culture today. Your material asks a powerful question. What if the state of our gut is shaping the state of our culture? How much of modern burnout, anxiety, and irritability do you think is biologically driven?
Well, okay, biologically, yeah, so very much biologically driven, very, very, very much biologically driven. And of course, biology being related to in this case of this context of the gut microbiome playing this huge role in our biology. So, there is no question that that if we can take care of our gut microbiomes and we can exercise and eat well, our cells function better. Better functioning cells mean more energy. When we were talking about the connection between serotonin and mitochondria, or melatonin and then mitochondria, that's just one very direct thing that we can see physiologically. Better cells, better cellular function, but that also means better mental function. That means thinking better. It means thinking faster. It means just a better balance in the way our neurotransmission is happening all through the body. Also, relates back to inflammation. Inflammation is chronic inflammation is, of course, a major cause of all sorts of disease, but in that directly also is a cause of a lot of pain. So you can think about it as being the cause of disease, but you can also think of it in a very practical sense as being the cause of pain. And pain obviously disrupts our ability to think well, to be in good mood, to get along with one another. And all of that combined has a lot to do with, as you're going with the society, how do we get along as a society? If we're healthy individuals, we have a much better chance of being cooperative with one another, thinking through our problems as a community and as a country and as the world as a whole, if we're healthy, grateful individuals. So, and when you have a whole population of sick people, you have a population of people who can't think much about the bigger picture because they're so worried about their own health issues. And then you get into more of these sort of, I don't think it's questionable that then the industry takes advantage of that. Greed feeds on sickness. And so now we become more dependent on other people and other institutions to take care of us. And therefore our loyalty starts to fall towards those institutions and other people rather than to ourselves and to our family and to our direct community. But even more practically, it's hard to think of things other than yourself and your sickness when you're sick. If you just have ever had the flu really badly, when you have the flu, you pretty much just think about how do you get better from the flu,
True.
You're just sick. I mean, you don't have a lot of excess mental capacity to be concerned with other things than your sickness. And so being well, it just has a lot of compounding effects for humankind.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you connect processed food culture with low resilience and irritability. Do you think some of what we call a cultural crisis is actually a gut health crisis wearing emotional and social mask?
Sure, absolutely. To me, there's no question about that. If you look at let's say, just the primary antidepressant medication that's been out there, that's whether it works or not, is serotonin reuptake inhibitors. What are they doing? Well, now when they study them, they say if they're doing anything, it's probably more what they're doing in the gut than in the brain, which is interesting. And really, why do we have serotonin dysregulation to begin with? Is that largely because we messed up our guts, since that's where most of the serotonin is produced? That's just a very direct, correlation, to make. We can also look at all of the other things that the gut microbiome is responsible for. Let's take the breaking down of Tylenol. Now, Tylenol, for example, is being related to a lot of these other cognitive issues and autism and that sort of thing. But you know what breaks down Tylenol for most of us is our gut microbiome. So let's say our gut microbiome is damaged, it's in dysbiosis, and we take Tylenol, and now their gut microbiome can't break the Tylenol down. So now it's toxic to our nervous system. Well, maybe that is a big part of, or part of the chain of events that leads to some of these other, cognitive health issues. So yeah, we could go into a lot of different B vitamins. So B vitamin production one of the correlations they made with dementia and the gut microbiome is that this disruption, people with certain dementias have certain kinds of cellular metabolic problems that don't allow them to process iron correctly. And then they link that back to, well, low levels of certain B vitamins, and then they in the body, and they link that back to lacking certain microbes that produce those B vitamins. There's another direct example. There's many. They're uncovering more and more of these direct examples. There was something else I wanted to mention too, and it just slipped my mind because it was related. Well, maybe it'll come back to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if a population is inflamed, undernourished, overstimulated, and internally dysregulated, does that make people easier to exhaust, distract, medicate, and control?
Yeah, I mean, sure. The more we get out of shape, the sicker we get, the less ability we have to fend for ourselves, the more susceptible we are to other people's control. And the more susceptible we are to other people's control, the more likely it is that they will do things to make us more controllable. And so it's a vicious cycle. And I think you can look at that also in many other aspects of human history. You can look at times in human history of famine, and how disruptive that made society, and how something had to come, either a lot of people die, certain people can take over power during those periods of time. But in a lot of cases, famine has been induced on a population. So burning down crops and things like that to take control of that population and to bring them into submission. And so the same thing can be applied, and the same thinking can be applied to this more modern day idea of hurting our nutritional abilities. So yeah, so it's sort of a famine. It's sort of a famine when you might be getting plenty of calories, but they're the types of calories that are really harming our health overall. And that might have been what I was thinking about a minute ago, the point I wanted to make. So processed sugar obviously has just, taken over our culture, and it seems like it's pretty much an addictive substance, and it's in everything. But the gut microbiome, plays a big role in breaking down sugar, but also if we consume too much of anything that we consume, we're going to feed microbes that like to feed on that thing. But sugar is just a good example, is that when we eat too much sugar, we feed microbes that love sugar, and then those microbes actually produce metabolites that signal to the brain to crave more sugar. And it's like that with other things as well, many other things. So these microbes are not just passively waiting for us to feed it one thing or the other. These microbes actually signal to the nervous system to give it more of what it wants. And so this could also go into pathogens and many other things. So these microbes are actually, trying to survive by telling the body to get more of what it wants. But on the other hand, there was this really good study that came out showing that, now this is kind of gets to our product a little bit, or very directly, not just a little bit, but many of the fibers sold on the market today, like the biggest brands of fiber sold on the market today, are not fibers that we would have gotten in nature that our microbiomes would have naturally fed on. But yet they're the biggest fibers on the market. Like a lot of them are wheat dextrins and corn dextrins. Those are not fibers that we would have naturally fed our microbiome. Some of them are synthetic fibers, etc. But think about inulin fiber, which is what we use in Good Bru. Inulin fiber is this kind of fiber that our ancestors and even, animals and things have been eating for millions of years and feeding the microbiome that likes this prebiotic fiber. And one of the things that they've just recently, a paper came out not too long ago showing that when people eat inulin, if it trains the microbes that like to, so inulin is a long chain of fructans, like, the word fructose, which is a certain kind of sugar, but inulin is an undigestible long chain of fructans. But when the microbes that feed on that prebiotic inulin start to learn how to break down fructans, it breaks down, means that it teaches and builds the kind of microbes that break down fructose. And so what they showed was that eating prebiotic fiber inulin, a fructan, now trains the microbiome to break down fructose. And then when it breaks down the fructose before it gets to the liver, it helps it to prevent fatty liver disease. But it's even better than that. It breaks down the fructose into useful amino acids, glycine and serine. These are two of the most important amino acids in our body. And glycine is a precursor to lots of things, but it's also a precursor to glutathione. And the liver produces glutathione, which is the body's most powerful antioxidant, which then allows the liver to function properly. So now you're taking, if you have the right microbes, they can actually take fructose, break it down into good nutrients that then produces good things for our body, and also better liver function versus, so it's the exact opposite of what we usually think of fructose doing. Fructose causing fatty liver disease. Now the fructose is getting broken down into amino acids that now the actual liver uses for good things, which makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of nature, because fructose is the main sugar in fruits. And we know that fructose in eating fruits also signals to the body to like put on more fat and that sort of thing. So that's why it also makes a lot of sense, that we should be eating our fruits and things and other things kind of probably in some sort of seasonal way, our bodies would probably expect to eat more berries and things in the late summer and early fall, than in the middle of winter, all that kind of thing. But it makes a lot of sense that if we're eating a fruit where we're getting fructose, we're also getting the fiber that goes along with that sugar that helps us to metabolize or create the kind or build or make the kind of microbes that help to break down that fructose. So they're working synergistically. We eat a fruit, we're not just eating a refined sugar, we're eating a fiber and the sugar together in a way that helps us to manage that sugar. And the same thing with the probiotic. The Bacillus coagulans that we use would be something we would get from nature at the outdoors that would then go in with the fiber to start producing the metabolites that then would help to build up the other microbes that, would then help us to break down our nutrients the right way. So yeah, it's a big, yeah. Okay. Nature has done a lot for us,
Absolutely.
And it's not, and it's not refined sugar, so
yeah,
be real careful with refined sugar. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more about refined sugar. So you speak about healing beyond the individual. What changes inside a family, a workplace, or a home when someone is no longer fighting their own body every day?
When they're not fighting their body, right. I mean, it's like we're a better team, right? I mean, it's a better team when everybody's healthy. And one person supports another person, and you start seeing the compounding benefits of everybody being healthier. And now we can support one another, and we can get through hard times much easier, and even come out better on the other side. So when somebody gets really sick, when somebody really, gets in that car wreck, or they just get old and they start to need the family members to help support them, they're there for one another, and they can do that for one another. Right. So if we're sick from things that we could be avoiding, we're really putting a real handicap on our family and everybody around us, which just makes it harder for everybody to move forward. So and then we kind of end up becoming more reliable on outside sources for help.
Okay.
And, you look at these other societies we were talking about earlier. I mean, they're very independent societies. The Greeks, the Sardinians. There's a group down in Costa Rica, the Okinawans. They're very self-reliant groups of people. Living very very good lives and not
a lot of community. A lot of community. Yeah. So do you think one of the biggest blind spots in modern self-improvement is that people are trying to build discipline, peace, and emotional regulation on top of irritated biology? Yeah.
Yes, there's no question about that at all. We're in the fact that there's so much focus on that now, on mindset and mindfulness, probably tells us that we're all feeling more and more that there's something wrong. And it's a great thing that people are getting more aware of their minds and issues, that related to self-awareness. But if there's also an indication that we're fighting something else, and if you're not healthy in your body and your gut, and you have things that are really problematic in that way, it's going to be very hard to ever have that settled, healthy, tranquil way of thinking. So they are very much closely related. And we touched a little bit about a friend of mine I was mentioned earlier. I won't go into everything that she does, but other than that, she works in this field of psychedelic therapy. But one of the really interesting things is this is well studied, is a lot of people aren't responsive to that therapy, and it's probably directed right back to the gut. And that would also indicate, even if you're not trying to do that kind of therapy, that it's just an indication of that connection between serotonin and the importance of the gut microbiome, and the fact that serotonin receptors are healthy. But the microbes that produce the main amino acid, tryptophan, are produced by the microbes. So if you think about all that's the precursor, molecule to serotonin and many of these other very important neurotransmitters, and that is largely produced by the gut and the gut microbiome. So if you're dysregulated, then if you have dysbiosis, there's a good chance you're not producing the very precursor molecules, the tryptophan family of micromolecules, that then are the precursor to all these other molecules and receptors functioning correctly. And if you remember, our brains produce DMT internally, like it's a very important molecule in our brain, endogenously, extremely important. That's a tryptophan precursor. Now, of course, our body's producing that, but somewhere those amino acids have to be there available to the body to do those things and produce those molecules. So the microbiome is a big player in producing the metabolites and the precursor molecules and amino acids and peptides that play a very direct role in the neurochemistry of, that makes mindfulness work, and you do that. So when you're mindful, when you're meditating, your body, or when you're out walking and you exercising, you produce brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Right? That comes from motion and from exercise. And so do many of these other molecules, but they're going to be better. Your body still has to have something. It doesn't just produce that out of thin air. There has to be precursor molecules for the body to really access, to do its best. And that's largely from the gut and the gut microbiome.
Okay. So guys, we can take a very quick break here to say, if this conversation is landing with you, share it with one person in your life who's running on stress, poor sleep, brain fog, and caffeine, and thinks that this is just normal adult life. And if you're new here, subscribe to the Conscious Man 7 podcast, because these are the conversations that go after the root, not just the symptom. Also, follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246 and the Conscious Man 7 podcast, or Todd Cave on Facebook to see what we get up to during the week and see how I merge fitness, consciousness, and spirituality to help people not only get into the best shape of their lives, but also level up in other areas of their life. Don't forget to check out the sponsor of our show, The Kembo, at thekembo.com to get yourself some cool orgonite pyramids, tower busters, and jewelry, which create orgone energy, which is the life source energy and neutralizes the nasty EMF waves that we are constantly bombarded with. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. Now back to Gabe. So, you have publicly warned people about miracle gut health products and misleading claims. What are the biggest red flags that you tell someone is being sold hope instead of genuine healing? Right.
Well, there probably are there's probably some products out there that are just complete gimmicks, but there's also just a more general thing to be thinking about. It's just basic science, well known, well studied, well researched. And that is, most of the colonizing microbes that we have in our gut come from our mothers at birth. And it's very hard to take something off of a shelf of these species of probiotics and get them to survive A, on the shelf, and B, through your stomach and through the stomach acid. And remember that in our immune system, the stomach acid is a major part of our immune function. And it's there, and most bacteria that tries to enter the body that way gets killed in the stomach, good and bad. And that's one of the things, going back to the whole acid reflux thing, is when people start to use antacids and proton pump inhibitors so that they raise the pH of the stomach, they're actually making the stomach more susceptible to pathogenic bacteria making it through. And which is a whole nother issue with the medicines and that way of treating acid reflux. So nature provided these spore-forming probiotics that survive out in the open and in the sun. They're not colonizing. They don't go into your gut and live there forever, but they come through. They go through the stomach because they're a spore. They make it to the lower intestine. They germinate, and then they support the other microbes. Now, that's not all spore-forming probiotics. We know Bacillus coagulans very much specifically does that. That's the probiotic we use. We've tried some other spore-forming probiotics in our formula, and they negated the benefits. So there's a lot of, so getting kind of to this idea of either generally trying to get probiotics off of a shelf to survive and do something in your lower intestine is very questionable. B, there's everybody's gut and gut microbiome is unique to that person, as unique as your thumbprint. So it's really hard to even say, okay, take this probiotic, this non-spore forming probiotic, and try to get it into your body through orally and through the stomach. That in itself is hard to do. But then on top of that, to try and say this is the perfect magic combination of these probiotics that you need, that's really hard to say too, because you don't know what specifically any one individual does need in terms of what magic combination of probiotics. And we also know that a lot of these probiotics, although they may serve a role, are not necessarily there to be friendly players with the other probiotics. So there might be probiotics that have a specific use case in certain conditions, but aren't necessarily great all the time. And it goes on and on and on, but you can also get into the subject of if you think there's any question to this, fecal transplants. Fecal transplants are an amazing emerging area of medicine that basically transplants ideally good fecal matter into a patient with bad fecal or bad dysbiosis. And the results on some of this is just mind-boggling. And I mean, changing things that if you want proof that the gut microbiome affects cognitive function and other diseases, just look at the results that are coming from this area of research around fecal transplants. Now, they're still kind of hard to get, or they don't know how to actually appropriately, prescribe them. But there are some things like C. diff. So here's another important thing. There's a lot of these, what we call bad microbes, that actually do something important in helping to train our immune system. But it's what's bad is when they take control and there's too many of them. So you hear about E. coli, for example, or C. diff, or H. pylori. And there's one theory that says you need to wipe all of those out, but that's really not true. There's so much science that shows that a certain amount of E. coli actually plays a role in a healthy immune function in the body because it's training the immune system about something specifically. C. diff, which is an antibiotic-resistant bacteria that a lot of people have a huge problem with after they go through a strong regimen of antibiotics. They end up with C. diff, and there's no way. And the one area where fecal transplants are prescribed now is for treatment of C. diff, and they're very effective. Otherwise, what they do is they just keep trying to pump more and more antibiotics into a person where the antibiotics cause the problem to begin with. But C. diff was there. C. diff didn't just enter the body after everything else was wiped out. It was there before, but it was in a small amount, and it was there probably doing something of importance. But it was in balance with all the other good microbes. Same thing with H. pylori. H. pylori is a primary cause of ulcers and that kind of thing. But most of us are walking around with H. pylori. the thing is that it needs to be controlled and in balance with the other good microbes. And so it's like this big forest. It's like the rainforest in your gut. It's not about wiping everything out and then just coming back with the good stuff. It's about having proper balance in the forest, right? Having, you wouldn't burn down a whole forest just to get rid of some poison ivy, and the poison ivy does something in that environment, in that ecosystem. As long as it's not taking everything over, it actually does some job there. And so this idea of people getting sold on just any probiotic or any gut health thing off the shelf or some detox mechanism or whatever, a lot of that is about the hype and the marketing of something that may not actually be able to do the job that in theory it's being sold to do. So just because you test something in a culture, in a petri dish, doesn't mean you can actually make it, work in the body. And so that's why with our product, there are 25 clinical studies behind the probiotic itself, because it is a spore-forming probiotic. It has very specific things and claims that we can make because it has been specifically studied with 25 clinical studies. But even more so, what I really like about our product is that we're taking the approach of providing something that you can use, adjust it to what works for you, and then also that it is a supportive to all the environment that supports the other good microbes. So we're doing what nature would have done, and that's provide organic prebiotic inulin fiber, which is the kind of fiber that the gut microbiome needs and has evolved to feed on, and a probiotic that comes from nature that survives through the stomach and then produces metabolites that we know then support these other keystone probiotics that we primarily get from our mothers, and they're very hard, to get from our food sources. Now, that said, I am a fan of making your own like probiotic yogurts and things, because I think when you do that, you're actually now creating a very large culture of something in a way that has a better chance of actually surviving and getting into the lower intestine. But you have to do it on a very regular basis. So going back to our friends there in Sardinia or Greece, they eat like a goat's cheese, a fermented goat's cheese product every day, but they make it there themselves. They're not buying it off a grocery store shelf. So it's got all the live cultures in it, and it's constantly in their diet. From the time they're a little kid to the time they die, they're eating this. And so it's constantly there. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go for 5 days and eat yogurt, from the store. You're going to make it there every day, and it's going to be a part of their diet every day. Kind of gets back to another thing. There was an old group in Bulgaria years ago studied like I think in the 1800s. They were known for having very long lifespans. The first guy that studied them didn't have the knowledge about microbes to make the specific connection, but he looked at different things in their lives. And one of the things he noticed was the food that they were eating, and they were eating a yogurt. Later, a group came along and studied the specific culture that was in that yogurt. And it was a Lactobacillus helvetica strain. Each one of these species then has all these other strains. And they did really relate that specific strain of microbe that was in the yogurt that these people made in this community that had these long lifespans. They made that direct connection to their health. So, but that's in their diet every day. They're making it, and it's a very specific strain, and it's in their diet, and they're making it themselves. So you got to be real careful about matching the actual product to the promise. It's one thing to say that fermented foods and yogurts are good for your gut. It's another thing to say this thing that you buy off of the store shelf down here at your local grocery store actually has that in it in a way that you can actually benefit from it. And also it's loaded down with sugar. It's there's two different stories there, right? Yes, fermented
definitely
cultures, could be very good for you, but is it available to you actually in the way that it's being sold to you at the grocery store shelf or whatever? So.
Okay. Now, in a health world obsessed with bigger stacks, more ingredients, and constant novelty, why do simple daily habits so often outperform flashy protocols?
All right. Well, it's kind of what we just said. You need to find things that actually do benefit you, that are in agreement with your body, and just do them consistently. It doesn't mean that you have to be. I think diversity is good too. That's just me. I don't think you want to have reliant on one very limited way of eating, but you do want to eat well, and you want to eat well consistently. I mean, you can feel the benefits of just a short period of time of eating good. You can notice that, right? And you can also notice very quickly feeling bad, like after a holiday dinner where you eat a bunch of sugar, you feel like crap. After that, you feel terrible. But there's a reason for that. So I was telling you something. So there are aspects to the short term of things, but health is a long game. And so we're going to mess up. We live in the modern world. It's pretty hard not to get into a fast-paced environment. And if you got to travel or, do whatever, I mean, some people are better than other people at not messing up. But still, there's still an element to consistency. Like you still got to keep coming back to something that's pretty grounded and also listening to your body to eliminate some things. I think there's a really good case so if we start talking about gluten and things like this, these are molecules that these plants produce as the part of their biodefense mechanism. So gluten is it's a protein produced in wheat that protects the wheat from insects. And most humans should be able to tolerate some amount of gluten. But now we have all these modified GMO plants and things and ways that we cook our wheat and process it and all of these. It makes it harder and harder. But, there are people who have real legitimate issues with gluten. And so, it's just an example that they've got to be much more careful with that. And I think we're all going to have certain aspects of that. But then on the other hand, if we get healthy and we have a healthy gut, we also can be more tolerant to these things. I know back when I was having severe acid reflux and GERD, raw tomatoes and some other things, peanuts, really set me off. And I started to identify that. Now, cooked tomatoes are a different story. You think about it, tomatoes came from the new world to the old world, and the Italians really picked up on tomatoes. But what did they do? Almost all of their stuff is cooked. Seeds are taken out, and the tomatoes are cooked. They probably realized something about tomatoes. And we know that tomatoes for a lot of people are a precursor to inflammation. If you've got gout or something like that, tomatoes can specifically really raw tomatoes can kick that off. That's because there is a molecule in tomatoes that is part of its biodefense mechanism. It's in the nightshade family and all of that. So it's a toxin from keeping it from getting destroyed. However, when my gut healed and I was better, I can now eat. I still try to limit them. I don't overeat them. I like them, but I can eat a raw tomato now. And, a few of them don't bother me. So there you go. I mean, it's a two-way street, right? We're supposed to be able to tolerate a certain amount of these things. And then we don't want to overdo them, but we also have to understand that when we get, unhealthy, when things get out of whack, then we're going to be even more sensitive to them. And we might have a whole society of people that are just oversensitive to a lot of things. These food allergies are off the charts. We're not supposed to be this allergic to all these different foods, but I guess once you become that way, you have to adjust your diet around that.
Absolutely. It's mad, like how much intolerances and allergies that we have today. So where do you think the gut health space is genuinely helping people wake up and heal? And where is it feeding off confusion, fear, and desperation?
Yeah, it's like anything, where people can make money from it. They're going to over amplify the benefits of things that aren't tested or aren't proven, or just the way that every new thing that comes down the line, now that's the thing they want to sell. But why was the thing before that not as good? Well, it's a lot of it's marketing, and then you have a lot of people who will get into these things and they don't really have a background or haven't educated themselves, but they're good salespeople, and they'll sell it because they're good at selling things. And and it might last for a little while. But genuinely speaking, things don't, if they're not helping people, over time, they'll get weeded out. But no, it's definitely a field because so many people are suffering, so many people are hurting. Everybody's looking for something, and it's easier to sell things to people who are suffering and looking for solutions. And one thing with our product is we have tremendous reorders and we have great testimonials. But we tell people, start really small. And that's the thing. Another thing. So this actually gets to your question. Prebiotics, for example. So there's a lot of prebiotic fibers that aren't the fibers, or as I mentioned earlier, that we would naturally get in our diets. And we actually hear from people often that have been trying to take some of these other fibers that their doctor or whoever told them to take, that actually made their problems worse. So these dextrins and things like that, which are the biggest selling items on the market. But also, even if it's a good prebiotic, a lot of times you'll buy things in like a capsule, and there's just not enough room in the capsule. Physically, the capsule is not big enough to hold enough of that fiber to make a real difference. We know that there's certain amounts that you need to really start making a difference. And so in our product, we use a scoop, and you can scoop it and put it in hot beverages. If you're a coffee drinker, a tea drinker, you can actually, one of the only products that you could, with this probiotic, that you can actually put in a hot beverage, because it survives your stomach acid. That should tell you your stomach acid is a more severe environment than the coffee. So that should tell you, that it's well studied to survive in coffee and those sorts of things, which should tell you it's also, surviving through your stomach and your stomach acid. But what's really important there, though, is you can, by using it as a scoop, you can adjust it to the amount that works for you. So we always tell people to start really small, start with a scoop or less. And then we have lots of customers who only use one scoop. And these are people that have even had severe digestive health issues that it's helped them with. But for like me, I use 2 scoops, but don't start with 2 scoops. Find what works for you. So you use it as a scoop, so you can actually get a significant amount of this prebiotic fiber. You get it with a probiotic that works with it. It has 25 clinical studies behind it, and it has the type of organic inulin fiber that we know that the gut microbiome likes. And there's lots of studies now behind the inulin as being an ideal prebiotic. But we also tell people, that if it doesn't work for you, I mean, it's not that it doesn't work for you. It's just that if you can't tolerate it, because a lot of times adding fiber and things to your diet will make it hard to tolerate certain gut health issues. Then, that's, let us know. Let us know. We have very few, we have a lot of great testimonials and lots of reorders. But occasionally we do get somebody who says, I just couldn't tolerate it, and we'll give them their money back or whatever. But one of the things I've seen, though, with that is that sometimes, and quite a few cases, not just sometimes, but it's been quite a few cases where once a person, that will tell them cut back, just cut way back and then start really slowly, they had some sort of issue like SIBO or something like that, and now they go back and they do it really slowly. And over time, they get to a point where they're using it regularly and using it in an amount that works for them. And now they're like, wow, this has helped me so much. And I think what's important about that is it's showing that something's going on in the gut to begin with. And a lot of people will try some other products and they were like, well, I didn't feel anything, good or bad. The fact that if you add some fiber and probiotic to your diet in a way that starts to have some effect, even if it's uncomfortable, is an indication that something's happening there, and then you need to, read your body and adjust for yourself and see what you can do from there. But one of the things with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, is that when you start adding fiber, you're supposed to have more bacteria in your lower intestine and less in your small intestine. And some people end up with a lot of bacteria in their small intestine. And so when you start adding the fiber to your diet, it's feeding everything, the good and the bad. And so that could be a very long process of adjusting. Whereas we hear, like, for people with chronic constipation and acid reflux, a lot of times really quick responses to those things. If you're dealing with something like IBS or Crohn's or SIBO, you're going to be in this thing for the long haul, and you got to take it really one step at a time. You could, but I do hear stories of people, not with just our product, but with other things, where over a consistent effort over a year or two, actually, becoming free of these ailments, but it's a long, but they didn't do it. There's no medicine that does that or whatever, it's a consistent effort for healing your gut. And a prebiotic fiber and a probiotic can be a part of that, part of helping with that, adjusting your lifestyle and your diet.
Okay. Now, on your site, you made the point that once the gut starts healing, so-called trigger foods may not be the whole story. What does that reveal about how superficial a lot of mainstream health advice really is?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gets back to this quick fix mentality, right? That's what I was just saying about the tomatoes with me personally and peanuts. And this is the case with a lot of people. Our bodies should be resistant. I mean, pretty normal foods, our bodies should be able, for most people, unless you have there's a very few people that actually have a real, like, two genes in their body that make them, that make them celiac, and even that, even when they see the people that have the genes for celiacs, if they go to other, like, I think it's Nigeria, I believe it's Nigeria, I might be wrong about that, but there's like this really large percentage of the population that have the genes for celiac disease, but very few of them, like only less than 20% of them actually have celiac disease. So there it goes to show you the environment. The environment and the foods that they're eating really is really the big factor in whether or not they develop the celiac disease or not. And so, yeah, it's kind of the short-term solution to things. Like, you got to take this antacid, or you got to take this proton pump inhibitor, or you got to do this to avoid your pain. And you're never going to heal your body to the point where now you will be back to being able to tolerate some of these things that we call, like, trigger foods. Right. Like, I mean, you have acid reflux. The problem isn't the trigger food. The problem is you got acid reflux, and now you have something you're overly sensitive to because of the acid reflux, because of the dysbiosis that leads to the acid reflux, or to whatever chemical or thing that's in your environment that's causing you to have that particular digestive health issue or other issues that are in your environment, So, it's like fix your digestive system, and you probably are not going to be as sensitive to everything that's around you, And we can see that with other medications. You can see it with, like, sensitivity to the sunlight. There's lots of things that we put into our environment, into our diet, and there's medications, antibiotics, all sorts of things that can make us overly sensitive to sunlight. You're not supposed, you're a human being. You're supposed to be able to go out in the sun. Now, you don't want to go out and burn yourself to death, and everybody's got different complexions. That's another thing. There's a genetic spectrum of people, who have less pigmentation and more pigmentation, so they're more able to resist the sun. But pretty much all of us should be able to go out and walk out into the sun, to some degree. And but if we're to the point where something's in our bodies and in our systems that are made us, like, super sensitive to the sun, well, I think that's more obvious, right? Like, that's pretty obvious. The sun's not the trigger. The sun is only the trigger because you got something underlying that. Well, it's the same thing with foods. It's just maybe that it's not as direct when you're thinking about food, It's it's a little more mysterious when you're thinking about the stuff that's internal, but it's the same idea,
Okay. So for the listener who feels overwhelmed and does not know where to begin, what are the first 3 practical changes you would make this week to improve digestion, energy, and mental clarity?
Well, it's going to be very much specific to every individual, However, I would just say, if I look at the population in general, if I look at myself in general, certainly we got to go right back to the basic things, right? Like exercise and cutting out certain foods that we know that aren't good for us or whatever. But I would say when it really comes to the modern society as a whole, I bet almost 90% of people that are having these issues know that they're eating too much sugar, for example, too much refined sugar. It's brutal on us. I'm not the best at all at keeping it out of my diet, but at the same time, if you work on a healthier body and a healthier microbiome, you're going to be better at those times when you do eat too much sugar. And this is well known. I mean, the microbiome has a huge role in blood sugar, blood sugar regulation, blood pressure, all these things. So you got to go back to just cutting out these processed foods as much as you can, being aware of your habits, keeping cutting the sugar down. And especially if you do it for some period of time, right? Like if you can really go through a long extended period of your time where you're more super disciplined, then you can come back and you can kind of let some of these things come back in, as long as you don't let them don't go wild with them. You know what I mean? Your body will heal. And then when you do eat a little bit too much sugar or this or that or the other, you're going to be a lot less sensitive to it. So the sugar, I would say the prebiotics. So whether it's like with our product and you just add it in that way, but also resistant starches and other like, obviously, if you eat potatoes, they can be fattening, but, and there is a process that you kind of go through to take a baked potato and really develop the starches. I think you kind of supposed to bake it and then leave it in the refrigerator overnight, and it helps the starches to bind together in a way that makes them a good prebiotic starch. But sweet potatoes, I think they're like a really good prebiotic starch right off the bat. So if you want to really start feeding your gut microbiome the right way, you do need to think about what are prebiotics, what are natural prebiotics, like inulin fiber, it's our product, or certain like potato starches, not necessarily eating French fries and those kinds of things, but like a good sweet potato or baked potato, brown rice, not white rice, but brown. There's a big difference between white rice and brown rice. Brown rice, that kind of thing. So getting the starches and things that your prebiotics that they need, and then exercise. And I know probably with your audience, there's probably not as many people who are just completely sedentary. But one of the things, I guess I learned sort of from myself, just living life. But I see it more and more with just people in general. And then I also see it kind of maybe social media is a little bit bad on the other extreme of this, of like showing so many things as having to be extreme. It's almost discouraging probably to some people is how to get healthy. It's like, because everything's on the extreme, like splashing your face with ice water as like 90% of the benefits of the ice bath, for example. But now you got people that got, they're like, you got to be in the Arctic Ocean for 30 minutes or something, but but what I was trying to get to is that exercise, it's just a couple of minutes. Now you obviously want to be shooting for developing, routines that are 20, 30 minutes of exercise, an hour of exercise. But I think what's underestimated is just how much the first few minutes of exercise matters. So how much that affects our mood and every other aspect of our body. It's getting that heart rate going even for a few minutes. And if people feel like if I can't go out and do something for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, then there's no reason to do anything at all. And that's what we don't want. We don't want people thinking that the bar is so high that it's not of any value to do something little, because it's actually the first few minutes of exercise that where lots of the gains come from. Just getting the heart up, getting the heart rate up, and getting blood flowing through the body starts to produce that brain-derived neurotropic factor. You can just take a walk around the house, or walk around the block. The other thing that does is it gives you that starting point to then continue more and more. So you always hear with like writer's block. One of the things I always tell writers is like just start getting, once you put like 3 words down on a page, everything else starts to flow. And that's usually the best way to just, defeat writer's block. Well, it's the same thing with exercise, right? Like just get started. If you'll do 2 minutes or 5 minutes, it's more likely you'll do 30 minutes. But there is a lot of value in doing that. So I don't know. I mean, if I just tell people the easiest thing to do is get the minimum amount, make yourself do any kind of exercise, cut out sugars, and add some prebiotic to your diet,
Okay. So faith and gratitude keep surfacing in your public conversations alongside recovery and entrepreneurship. How did your health struggle reshape not just your habits, but your worldview?
Yeah. life and just life teaches us, right? Like if we just live life, and life teaches, it knocks us down and it teaches us. But the gratitude thing was that was a big one, because I went through a lot of different things. We won't go into it all now, but I actually trademarked for and have the domain "Gratitude Makes the Attitude," and that came. And I haven't done a lot with that, but I do plan to do more with that. But that's not. I'm an entrepreneur, right? So that's how an entrepreneur's brain works. It's like, well, this is so important to me. Why can't let me do something with it? Let me make a brand out of it. And right now, there's not a big brand developed around that or anything, but the reason they came from me actually saying that to myself. So a few things when I was really under a lot of stress and struggles, I did a lot of reading. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was a really important book to me. And Marcus Aurelius, for a guy who was born into wealth and to the elite class of Rome, was a Stoic, and he was it's incredible to read that book and think that this guy was an emperor. He's like so down to earth, so down to earth. It's humbling to think of this guy writing, and he wrote that book to himself. He wasn't writing that book to other people. He wrote that was to himself. In the concept of gratitude is throughout that entire book, and of course it's been translated, and so it's always been translated, and you don't know you're reading exactly what Marcus Aurelius was trying to get across, but there is a famous little piece in there that talks about having an attitude of gratitude, and I kind of just changed that in my mind. This is before I decided to get a domain name and all that. I was really doing this for myself. I was saying a lot of these things to myself, a lot of self-talk, a lot of a lot of things to try and just make myself a better person and to lift myself out of a bad place. And so I just, in my mind, kind of refigured that and said, that's gratitude that's really driving it. You don't have a good attitude until you're grateful. And I just think this is the translation, of Marcus Aurelius's work. But I really thought that was more of the ideas. Like you got to start being grateful for everything. Look at all the wonders of just being alive. It's a miracle that we're just alive. That none of us should even be here. It's such a large probability that we would even exist. I mean, it's just such a small probability that you or I would even exist. It's mind-boggling. So just be grateful that you get a chance to see this world and live this life and to learn these lessons. And so to me, it was being grateful that allows us to have the attitude that we needed to get through any specific, that's just the way that I started church. So I started saying it to myself. Gratitude makes the attitude. Gratitude makes it. I still say it today. I try to make sure I say that 5 times a day. I don't know if I do it every day, but I really do, because it helped me so much. But I did that, and I did the Wim Hof stuff. And Wim Hof was a lot about gratitude. That helped me a lot. There was some, and then quite a few other ones that I read about. And of course, I grew up in a Christian family. I don't have a testimony per se or a ministry or anything like that, but I was very much influenced by that. And so, when I come back and look a lot of the best lessons of the Bible are about being grateful, being thankful. There's a lot of other stuff in there too, but the ones that seem to really hit home is just like, I think that's what God and the universe wants from us. I really think that when we're not grateful, that's when it really, life slaps us across the face. And so I don't know what life's all about, but I think that's a big part of it. I think that the universe wants us to be grateful, and I think that's a big part about about our experience of life. Is the more grateful we are, the better it all is. So we get a reward for being grateful.
Very true, very true. It's a very big part of my practice, my daily practice per day, because obviously to be a coach and to have a show, you have to have gratitude, because you put yourself out there and you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Because by putting yourself out there, you can become a target for people to attack you and stuff like that. So, you have to really create resilience. And the resilience comes from being grateful for all the blessings and all the challenges that you have in your life. So looking back now, do you see your health crisis as an interruption in your life or the thing that forced you into your real work?
No, it's been, we have to, I think I say we have to have, I guess most of us seem to have something that challenges us to really be appreciative to what we're doing. So no, it's when you make it through these things, you're better, you should come out a better person on the other side, and absolutely, it's just one of those things that builds us, our character and makes us who we are. And we need to pass that on to other people. That's like every generation needs to hear from us, even if, like I said, if it doesn't immediately affect them or benefit them, just saying it, just passing the message along, is important, because it sticks there. And then when they're in a bad place, they've got something back in their subconscious to help them, direct them. And I don't know, I mean, sometimes young people have the most inspiration for us. Like, you don't always have to live through all of these things. There's sort of some innate awareness of it in young people, and then they lose it, or we lose it sometimes. It kind of goes all around. It's like, it does seem to be somewhat of a progression through life. As we age, we get we experience more things, ups and downs, and it kind of builds wisdom and character. So there does seem to be a little bit of a linear progression there, but it's not 100% that way. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I liked what you had said earlier in the conversation, that we need to have good stresses, and good stresses are challenges. And when you are not challenged and you don't have like that, what you said, good stress, there simply is no growth. There simply is no development of self, of character, of really realizing what you can really achieve, who you are, like your power, your strength. So I do think that through my journey, I wouldn't even have the podcast if I didn't have some challenges in my life that pushed me to actually do this, So as we wind out this conversation, what do you think modern men are more likely to do when their body starts sending warning signs? Numb the symptoms, outsource responsibility, or rebuild from within? And what is the first action you would urge them to take today?
Well, every person's different, but it does seem like our society has gone very much towards numbing the symptoms and outsourcing the problem. I can't say I didn't, I only have lived in the time and the period that I've lived in, and I can't really go back in time, but it does seem to me like that is the modern way that for most people, or for a very high percentage of people, and start to just believe in yourself, believe in other people who aren't always necessarily considered to be part of the mainstream. A lot of how we help one another, there is an aspect of intelligence to it and that kind of thing. I mean, you'll certainly get people that'll tell you to do crazy things that aren't going to be helpful to you. I mean, that does exist out there in the world, but when you find people whose heart's in the right place for helping one another, that's a great place to start. And then maybe one person has had an experience that's related to your experience, and they're the ones that have that have the answers for you. So start believing in yourself, believing you can take control of your health and your well-being into your own hands. And then that'll allow you to find the help that you need in a much more informed way. In other words, definitely don't just start numbing the problem. Certainly there's certain things that we can do that can be helpful in a short period of time, but you got to learn. I don't know. You just have to learn the right balance of that, right? I mean, you don't become reliant on these things and that numb problems, and you certainly can't just outsource. I don't think you should just outsource all your problems to the person that says that they're or that you even think they might not even say it, but you think it's just an expert. You need to really be aware of your health on a day-to-day basis, and that you can learn and that you can do a lot for yourself. And then by doing that, you're also going to be much more informed for where you go to find help. That's believe in yourself.
Okay. Yes, definitely. I think that one of the main, I would say, contributory factors as to why we are in the state of consciousness that we are in now worldwide and on a grand human scale is lack of self-belief. And I think that is a combination of religion, the system itself, culture, which really just stands for cult, and also the programming that we've received through media, social media, and all the other fancy marketing schemes through movies, etc., music videos that they have indoctrinated us and programmed with. It is mostly to have lack of belief in self. And this is why a lot of us have groupthink and we have herd mentality, because to fit in is like that numbing where we don't want to think for ourselves. So we just follow what everyone else does, because if everyone else is doing it, it means it must be right, because, it's just like the excuse that religious people use. Well, if 1 billion people on the planet, 2 billion, whatever number in X religion are doing it, it gives quotation marks validity because everyone else is doing it. But I tend to think that if everyone is doing something, my personality is that I most likely am going to do it the opposite, because I think that for the most part, humanity, when they follow what everyone else does, gets it wrong. And we tend to make choices based on emotion instead of logic. So I do think that, and I agree with you, that belief in self is one of the main contributing factors as to why basically our consciousness has fallen so low that we need to outsource responsibility to some guru or some savior or some system or some politician to save us. And basically that's just a way of numbing the pain or the emptiness that we feel because we don't fit in. Gabe, this has been a very interesting conversation, and we've learned a hell of a lot about gut health, microbes, that word that I keep forgetting all the time, dysbiosis, because I never heard about that before even researching to talk to you today. So please tell the lovely folks at the Conscious Man 7 where they can find you. You can tell us about the products and the services you provide, all that kind of stuff. If you help people in their journey with gut health and all of that great kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, we mostly just do one product. We just do one product right now. It's Good Bru. It's a prebiotic, probiotic. So we got 3 sizes, but it's all the same thing. It's and you can find it at goodbru.com, spelled BRU. So it's GOODBRU.com. And I'd like to offer a discount to your audience. Do you have a specific discount code that you typically like to use?
Yeah, CM7.
What is it? CM7?
Yes.
CM7. Okay, so I'll create a 10% discount code. So it'll be CM7. So you can either go goodbru, GOODBRU.com /CM7, or you can just put CM7 in actually, I don't know about the link. Just put in CM7 as a discount, and that'll give you. I will create that. So CM7 will be a 10% discount. And basically, Good Bru is just 2 ingredients. We don't use any preservatives. We don't use any processing aids. It's a probiotic Bacillus coagulans that has 25 clinical studies behind it, and organic prebiotic fiber, inulin fiber, which is the kind of fiber that you get in nature. You can use it to your liking, so you can adjust it 1 scoop or 2 scoops or half a scoop. Find out what works for you. Start small, and it's very unique because you can actually put it in your daily routine. It's fine in coffee. That's where most people use it. You won't even taste it in your coffee or your tea. Some people, I had a lady call me the other day. She puts it in her bone broth. She puts it in bone broth every day. You put it in yogurt. I actually have a friend who uses it as part of making her homemade probiotic yogurt. So she uses Good Bru as the prebiotic in the yogurt, plus what other probiotics she puts in there. So it'll actually support other probiotics. If you're taking other probiotics, our product will be symbiotic with that too. So because we have a significant amount of fiber. So with that, so use it in your coffee, your tea, your juice, your yogurt, your oatmeal, whatever it is, your bone broth, and adjust it to how it works for you. And it really does a great job of supporting the colonizing microbes that you get from your mothers at birth. Plus, it's been shown to help improve protein utilization, immune function. These are digestive health, So goodbru.com, CM7 for 10% off.
Yes, and guys, go over there and support the Good Bru, because we only bring the best minds, the people that have the best products, the best information on the Conscious Man 7, because we are trying to rip the veil back to get the best minds and information out there. And guys, we do this with love. So go over there and give Gabe and Good Bru some support. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. Guys, we also talked a lot about health on this podcast. We talked about getting into shape, and we also talked that affects how you show up in the world. So if you would like to start your fitness journey and you're not sure where to start, you can hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name, Todd Cave. Send me a message. Let's have a chat and let's see if you're a good fit for the Compound Body Training Army, because I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by visiting our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link to our Amazon store, Todd and Me, will be in the description of this podcast. Now, if you are on a spiritual journey or you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. So again, hit me up on my socials at Adriano_246 or my name, Todd Cave. Send me a message. Let's have a chat and let's see if I can connect you with some magic mushrooms. Magic mushrooms also help people with PTSD, CPTSD, and also help rewire your brain. So if you want to get into shape, taking magic mushrooms, either microdosing or macrodosing, is a good way to jumpstart that process, because you set the intention. Magic mushrooms rewire your brain. And if you work with me, boom, you will actually start to get better and better results, because everything is alignment. If you also would like to support this podcast and you're listening to this show on one of the podcast platforms and you simply don't like ads, you can join our Patreon, our locals community. You'll get early access to all of our podcasts. You will get access to me, because I get loads of messages on social media and I reply to all my messages on Patreon first, just like how I do with my coaching clients. So link to the Patreon or locals community will be in the description of this podcast. And with just your small support, you help support this podcast, you help it to grow, and you help us with things like editing, and also to spend time to do some research to get good quality guests like Gabe on the show. And also you get to learn about good products like Good Bru. Lastly, if you are listening to this show as well and you're in an area with loads of chemtrails and you're surrounded by loads of EMFs, visit the sponsor of our show, The Chembo, at thechembo.com to get yourself some cool organite, pyramids, tower busters, and even jewelry. Just like this necklace that I have on today, that is one of the organite pendants. So go over there and visit the store, thechembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. Guys, if this episode made you rethink burnout, anxiety, brain fog, or the way modern life may be affecting the body from inside out, share it with a friend, your partner, a family member, or someone who has been running on empty for far too long. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and tell us this. Has modern burnout been sold to us as a mental problem when the gut may be one of the missing pieces? Don't forget to subscribe to the Conscious Man 7 podcast, leave a review, and help get conversations like this out in the open, because awareness now is far better than regret later. Gabe, many thanks for being a guest on the Conscious Man 7 podcast. This was a very informative conversation. I'm going to have to listen to this a couple times back, because you dropped a lot of information and a lot of the terms, honestly, I never heard about before. And I will have to be taking some notes myself, just like the listeners.
Thank you, Todd. It has been a pleasure to be on.
Absolutely. To all the Conscious Man 7 family around the world, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for supporting the mission, and thank you for choosing to look inside of you to heal, as it creates a ripple effect in the world. This was another episode of the Conscious Man 7 podcast, the place where we go beyond the veil in search of the truths that they hide from you to help you reclaim your power and to step into the truest version of yourself. You are the help that you've been looking for. So remember, folks, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Before we wrap up, whatever today's conversation sparked in you, use it. Growth isn't just mental. It isn't just spiritual. It's physical. And it starts with what you're putting into your body every single day. 1 billion life cultures, 3.5 grams of prebiotic fiber, 0 excuses. Go to goodbru.com/CM7, use code CM7 at the checkout to get 10% off. Link is in the show notes below. A conscious man doesn't just think about change, he makes it. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.